All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Amy Stansberry. I'm the co-founder of a Functional Democracy, which is a local civic education organization. We produce a little zine, Beginner's Guide to Local Government. And I'm also the editor-in-chief of the Austin Common, which is a local news site that helps Austinites be informed and make a difference. And so today, really want to talk to everyone about civics, but also voting with a theme towards that, since that's what's happening. Today's the first day of early voting, if people aren't aware. And so I kind of want to, one thing we try and do with the Austin Common is focus on local elections in particular, because, I think at this point, most people know who they're voting for president, right? And that's what drives people to the polls, which is great. But there's a ton of other important names on that ballot and propositions on that ballot that affect our lives just as much as that presidential election. And oftentimes people just walk into the voting booth, make their top selection for president, maybe they vote for senate, and then they walk out because you don't want to pick someone that you haven't done any research on or don't know anything about, which is totally understandable, and it can be super confusing. So what I want to try and do today is give you all just a little bit of an overview to make that a little less confusing. So that way you do keep voting. They call it down ballot voting. It's kind of the jargony term for it in our local elections here. So Maria, can I just go ahead and share my screen and stuff
Yeah,
then?
please
Okay,
do.
great. I will do that now. Okay. So I think actually I'm going to start with, let's see. This is some info that I had. Yeah. I different. Let's see. Will let me advance? Okay. Okay. So a few things to keep in mind that I love to remind people is, one, it's just like why local elections matter. And a big part of it, and one component that I always like to remind folks is that it's your vote matters the most in local elections, because so few people honestly participate in them. I really like to share this data set from Austin's 2014 mayoral election, which ultimately chose the mayor that we have today. In that election, which had to go to a runoff, only 13% of eligible voters in Austin cast a ballot. So you have less than 15% of our city picking who's going to be the leader for all the rest of us, which is crazy. And a lot of times when you have situations like that, when voter turnout is so low, you have to ask yourself and look at, well, who is voting, right? Because those people have way more power than they normally would. And this data is from this really cool project called the Who Votes for Mayor project. Some researchers out of Portland State University did this, but you can see there 29%, almost 30% of registered voters over 65 who voted, and less than 8% of registered voters under 35 are voted. So a lot of times in these local elections, the electorate tends to be older, whiter, wealthier than the general population. And that's not to knock older people for voting. It just means all the rest of us should vote too, right? That's like and there's a lot of power there, actually, because so few people vote. A few votes really can make or break an election, and I've seen local elections here in Austin that have truly been decided by 100 votes, 200 votes. So your vote does matter. Okay, so I want to go over a little bit of basics about what is going to be on your ballot, and it kind of ties to just how our local system works too. So I'll kind of show you both here. If you live in Austin, these are the local city races that are going to be on your ballot. So when it comes to city council, 5 of Austin's 10 city council districts are up for election this year. Districts 2, 4, 6, 7, and 10. On the next slide, I've got more information about how you can figure out which district you live in. But basically half of Austin city council districts are going to be on the ballot, as well as Proposition A and B. Propositions are basically a yes/no vote. You decide, am I for this thing or am I against this thing? And both Proposition A and B, which are going to be on the ballot if you live in Austin, have to do with transportation. So a pretty important topic here in town, in a place that suffers from bad traffic. So So if you're not familiar, the city of Austin is divided into 10 separate city council districts, which you can see on that map there. And each district is represented by one council member. And every 2 years, 5 council members are up for election. That's what's happening now. And you can see the districts are kind of divided up geographically. A lot of times I get this question of, are city council districts gerrymandered, right? That's like a term a lot of us hear about, read about in the news. Thankfully, no. In Austin, actually, our city council districts are drawn up by an independent citizens commission. So it's just people of the general public. There's a very complicated process for selecting a random group of people from all different parts of the city. And really the design here and the idea is to keep neighborhoods close together, none of those crazy, funky looking maps. And also to ensure that minorities and other underrepresented groups get their fair representation on city council. And so that's our map there. And so if you remember, I'll say again, the districts that are up, it's 2, 4, 6, 7, and 10. So you can kind of see them there if you live in those districts. If you're not sure what council district you live in, you can also go to the website austintexas.gov/government. Maybe I'll put that in the chat in a minute here, and you can double check what district you live in. That's a good way to figure it out. So a little bit about what city council members do. This is always a big question is, okay, well, if I'm going to vote for them, like what the heck is their job even? Maybe you see about it in the headlines, but it can be hard to keep track. So city council members are basically, like, if you remember your old school civics class, like they're the lawmaking body for our city. So they're the ones that create laws, which on the city level are usually called ordinances, and really come up with like high level policy direction for our city here in town. They set the city budget and property tax rate. So if you're following the news this summer, there was a lot of debate and conversation around our city's budget. They're in charge of that, as well as our property taxes. And a key thing to note is they don't run with any party affiliation. So when you're voting for your council member, you're not going to see next to their name a little D or an R, which can make it a little more difficult for folks, right? Because it means you have to actually know something about the candidates. You can't just pick whichever party you tend to vote for. But at the same time, it can be nice and a little refreshing because it allows for a little bit more diversity of thought. You have more candidates to choose from. And a lot of times it's less black and white, like what party they might come from. But it can also mean that there's like 6 or 7 candidates on the ballot all at once. So you have to do a little bit more reading sometimes to figure out who you might be interested in voting for. And then last on there, I just put that city council members also help Austinites in their district access city services. If you're ever in need of something, or you're like, oh, there's this pothole in my street, or my park is a mess, or it needs this, or I can't get in contact with the person I need to get in contact with at the city, call your council member. Their office, it's unlikely you'll talk directly to the council member about this, but they have staff whose whole job is constituent services, they call it. So basically just to help you navigate the city, and they might be able to direct you to the right person, advocate on your behalf, things like that. And being a city council member is a full-time job. So when these people get voted into office, this is their job. If they do something else beforehand, they usually quit that job and they're doing city council full-time. Some key issues of this election that have to do with city council is like topics they deal with. Police reform is a big issue that city council members are debating on this election cycle. Again, if you've been following the news, you know that here in Austin, we made some big changes to our police department's budget recently. And so that's become a big issue in this election. There are lots of candidates that are running because they do not like the choices that city council made. And then you have city council members who are running for re-election that are defending their decision to make those changes to the police department budget. So there's a lot of debate there. Homelessness and housing affordability, another big issue in Austin. You probably see in the news or as you're driving around town, right? Housing affordability is constantly an issue in this city and something that city council has more direct control over. Obviously, COVID-19 economic recovery, lots of conversations about that, how we're supporting small businesses, music venues, artists, the whole nine. And then As always in Austin, I don't have it on here because we're going to get into it in some of the props, but transportation and environmental issues. Our city is about to pass a new climate plan, and transportation is a big component of that and ties in to some of the props. So I want to share a little bit. So that's city council, 5 city council races for 5 different council seats. That's a big thing on the ballot. Another big thing on the ballot, like I mentioned, 2 propositions, right? So Prop A, if you see on the right-hand side there, this is like the text that will be on the ballot, this approving the ad valorem tax rate, blah blah blah. It's confusing and a little overwhelming, so I want to break it down a bit. This is like the legally language that they have to put on the ballot, but it's not as complicated as it looks on here. It's all about public transit. So when you think about Prop A, think public transit. Okay, so the basics of this one is in November, you're going to be able to vote on whether or not Austin should make a $7.1 billion investment in something called Project Connect, which is basically a major expansion of our public transit system here in town. And I mean major, it includes 27 miles of rail, 9 new park and rides, 4 new Metro Rapid routes, 3 Metro Express routes, 15 neighborhood circulator zones, which is like on-demand pick up and drop off, and a downtown transit tunnel, like a subway, basically, a tiny one underground in downtown. So a huge expansion of our public transit system, which right now is quite minimal. To talk a little bit more about what that means, one of the big parts of the plan is this thing called the Orange Line. You can see on the map there a little bit. It's one of 2 new light rail lines that will be built if Project Connect is approved by voters, Prop A. It'll run in its own dedicated lane from North Lamar, past UT, along South Congress, and all the way to Stasny. You can kind of see there. That's like a little zoomed in version. So you can see some of the parts. It'll stop by St. Edwards, Oldthorpe, South Congress, Auditorium Shores, Crestview, Triangle, Hyde Park. And then the other big rail line is the Blue Line. It's the other light rail line that will be built if this is approved. It'll run in its own dedicated lane to the airport along Riverside Drive and then downtown past Rainey. So this is the airport route, really. And then it kind of merges with the Orange Line. You can see a little bit more there. All along Riverside, Montopolis. The downtown transit tunnel. Once these rail lines pass through downtown, you'll be able to transfer between the 2 of them and connect through this downtown transit tunnel. It'll be air conditioned, include music, restaurant, things like that, and make it easy for you to transfer. And then the last rail line is a commuter rail line called the Green Line. This one is a project that'll be built last on this list. It's kind of farther out, but it is a commuter rail line, kind of like our Red Line, if you're familiar with that now. And it goes all the way out, far, far out into East Austin, again, to bring people who might be working in the city during the day downtown. Here's more about the bus routes. We need to go into them specifically, but there will be more bus services around town. And then the big question here, obviously, is the cost of it. That's what everyone always wants to talk about. Again, $7.1 billion is this initial plan. About 45% of it is expected to be funded by the federal government, and $300 million is going to be funding to prevent displacement along the new transit line. So this is a big one and is pretty unique. Several different advocacy groups here in town worked with the city and with Cap Metro to get this included in the proposition. And obviously this is a big fear in Austin. If you bring new amenities to an area, it just serves as a gentrifying force, right? And so this $300 million is being set aside to try and combat that a bit. The way this gets spent will actually be dictated by a community advisory group that'll be made up of community members, and the idea is to allow these communities that are along this line to steer how this funding could be spent on things like affordable housing and other anti-displacement measures. And then you see there $10 billion. There's actually more that was in the original Project Connect plan. They cut it down a bit to $7.1 billion because of COVID-19, but that is the someday, if we wanted to as a community, we could decide to build the other 3 billion. And then the price. So what this election is basically you're asking yourself, do I want all of those things on that list at this price? That's the other part of it. So we have to pay for it, and we pay for it through a property tax increase, which works out to be about $284 a year in property tax increases if voters approve Project Connect. And the average home, when we talk about it this way, is $325,000. A question I get a lot when this comes up is, yes, even if you're a renter, you will pay this. It's not as direct. You don't get a property tax bill like a homeowner does, but your landlord is definitely going to pass this fee along to you, unless they're just like a very kind landlord. But chances are you'll pay this in one form or another. And that's annual. So that's kind of a permanent addition to our property taxes. And the idea is to fund both the construction of the project and then to help with maintenance after it's built. And then let Nina talk about Prop B, but before we get to that, I also wanted to share a little bit of info, again, from the Austin comment about voting early, and just give a little bit of tidbits on that since we're in this space right now. Oh, my little iCloud is always upset with me. Okay. So in case you haven't heard, today is the first day of early voting. Has anyone voted already? Curious. Okay. So today is the first day you can early vote. Early voting in Texas lasts from October 13th to October 30th, and election day is November 3rd. I get a lot of questions about this. The cool thing about early voting, you don't have to do anything special. You don't have to like fill out a form or qualify in some way like you might have heard for mail-in voting. Anyone that's registered to vote can early vote. It's just a way for people to not all have to go vote on election day. It's not any different than regular voting. It's just early. And so we saw up here, polls are open in Travis County, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Saturday, and noon to 6 on Sundays. And all you have to do to vote early, if you live in Travis County, you can go to votetravis.com and find a list of polling locations and wait times. I think there's like 37 different polling locations open during early voting, and you can vote at any polling location in your county. If you live in Williamson County or Hayes County, it's a very similar process as well. I can stick in links to the chat also maybe when Nina's talking for those websites, but every county has their own election website, and that's where you go in order to find your local polling locations. Key things to remember to bring to the polls: an ID. There are 7 different types of IDs that are acceptable in Texas. Again, that'll be on your county's election website. Your best bet is a Texas driver's license if you've got that, or a US passport. A mask. Please wear a mask when you vote. That's, I believe in Texas, not technically a requirement in order to vote, but obviously our local elected officials are asking you to please wear a mask. And the key thing to keep in mind too that comes up a lot is you can't bring your cell phone into the voting booth with you. As someone that doesn't have a printer, I find that endlessly frustrating, but it means that basically what you have to do, and what I recommend, is just like get a little notepad or a piece of paper, like sit down in front of your computer before you go vote and write down the names of everyone you're voting for, because otherwise you'll forget. There's a lot of names on that ballot, and you can't bring your phone in to reference. So just write them all down on a little cheat sheet, and you can bring that paper into the voting booth with you in order to figure it out. Kind of talked about this a bit. And again, most of the counties are doing this as well, asking for people to wear masks. You'll be given one of those silly looking finger gloves if people have seen those on social media, in order to protect your finger. There'll be hand sanitizer and kind of physical barriers and separators between the poll workers and you. I have a little bit about voting by mail. Honestly, if you're someone who wanted to vote by mail and you haven't requested to do it yet, my advice is for you to early vote. The county offices are being overrun with requests for mail-in voting. If you really feel like you can only vote by mail, you still have until October 23rd technically to request a mail-in ballot, but the county is being slammed with requests. So if possible, try and early vote. Look at those maps to find a time when no one is going to be there and just go in and get it done really quick. But you still can vote by mail. We went through some of these guys already. And a little bit of tips for just like how to prep for the day. A lot of times what I do is I start by going to one of two websites. I go to votetravis.com. What else to do? If you live in Travis County, which is the majority of Austin, but not all of it. If you live far northwest Austin, you're in Williamson County. So this is the website. And what I do is I find my personal ballot. This is not an intuitive website. I'm just going to warn you. It's a government website. It's not great, but it gives you what you need. And what you do is you go to this voter lookup. You type in your first name, your last name, and your birthday, and then hit look me up. And when you do that, a little personalized sample ballot will pop up for you. And so if you have a printer, I recommend just like printing out that ballot and then circling on it who you're voting for as you're doing your research, and then bring that with you. Or if you don't have a printer, just write those names down on your little cheat sheet paper and then do your research. And then the other website I always go to when you're starting to do research is another option there is 411.org. This is run by the League of Women Voters, a little bit more tech friendly of a website, more mobile friendly as well. You type in your address, it gives you a personalized ballot, and then it actually gives you information, has side-by-side comparisons of all the different candidates. So I really like to use this especially for like national and state and judge races, some of these smaller ones that maybe you don't see a lot of media coverage about. You'll see answers here. Let's see if I can. There's also voting info on here. I wonder. Just to show you. Trying to do it without everyone seeing my address. Oh well. You can type in your address though, and it does pop up everything. So it's pretty nice. And then on our website, on the Austin Common, we also have a bunch of voter guides, some of what I just shared with you today, the austincommon.com/vote. We have an email series you can sign up for where we just like package all this information into 3 simple emails, one on general voting info, one on city council races, one on all the props. And then we also just have on our website all of our election guides, city council elections, Prop A, Prop B, some of the district city council races. So you can kind of find all that info, a lot of it what I shared with you today on this, the austincommon.com/vote. That's how you find it. Yeah, so I could talk like endlessly, but I think maybe I'll pause there and see if anyone has any questions about voting, about how city council works, about the props, anything like that. You can feel free to just unmute yourself or put it in the chat.
Hey, Amy, this is Ivy.
Hi.
So back on my camera for a second. I had a question actually from a friend today. They wanted to know what happens if you have an expired ID and you still need to take it to the polls with you. Are you still able to use that ID if it's expired?
Yes, if it's a Texas driver's license, you can use an expired one. Let me double check with the how long it can be expired. It's longer than I thought it would be. If it just recently expired, they'll definitely be fine. Let me see what it said on here. Um, it says the acceptable form of photo identification may be expired no more than 4 years. So if, as long as it expired within the past 4 years, you actually can still use it as long as it's a Texas driver's license. They do not, an out-of-state driver's license is not an acceptable form of ID in Texas, which is a pain for a lot of people, especially if you recently moved here and you haven't been able to get the DMV because everything has been closed. If that's the situation for you or a friend, I know that's like a common one lately. You can bring a passport if you've got it. If you don't have a passport, there is a way for you to still use your out-of-state ID. On Vote Travis website, you can find more information about this. But basically what you have to do is, it's called a reasonable impediment declaration. It sounds very fancy, but really it's just when you get there, a paper you have to sign saying that like, I wanted to get a new ID, but I couldn't, which is like because of COVID, because I just moved here, because there's been delays, and there have been delays. And then you're able to cast a real ballot that day as opposed to a provisional ballot or something like that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any voting questions? City council
Actually,
questions?
actually, I have a quick question. So if someone arrives at the polling location like half an hour before it's set to close, but you're in line and the line is long, you can still vote?
Yes, you can still vote. It doesn't matter how long the line is. The rule is just that you have to be in line by the time the polling location closes.
Gotcha.
So this is one that comes up a lot. It makes me laugh a bit at UT because I was this way too when I was in college. For some reason at UT, they always wait till the last minute and the lines are always the longest. Election day after voting, it's always one of the last precincts to like be able to officially send in their results because it's always like everyone's doing it at the very last moment. But it doesn't matter as long as they got in line by 7. Sometimes they might be waiting in line for 4 hours because the line is that long. It's fine. Everyone who's in line gets to vote. So
Do they have someone who is like volunteering at the polling location, like essentially stand in the back of the line to like make
yeah,
sure?
and kind of wait. Yeah.
Yeah.
And mhm. um but yep, you still can do it. And it's tricky. Like I would say for folks, don't be there's lots of resources out there that help you when you're in line to vote or when you're ready to vote and someone is telling you you can't. So that's something to keep in mind too. Like, don't be afraid to take out your phone and do a quick Google search. Honestly, like the ACLU, there's several voters' rights groups here in Texas that have emergency numbers that you can call in order to be like, hey, I'm getting turned away. Here's my situation. Like, is the poll worker correct? And sometimes it's not even a malicious situation. Honestly, poll workers, it's a paid job, but they're essentially volunteers. It's not like they're professional poll workers, and they might have gotten any kind of information. So it's helpful to know that you can push back on that a bit if you feel like you're getting turned away and you shouldn't be.
Cool. Thank you.
I have a question. My name is Nicole, and I'm not sure if this kind of falls under your umbrella, but do you know when the city ends up deciding who helps at the polls, like poll worker applications and things like that, like how that process works?
Yeah, so poll workers and elections in general in Texas are all run at the county level. So in Austin here, most of us live in the city of Austin and Travis County or Williamson County. And it's the county that is in charge. And I believe that Travis County at least is still hiring poll workers. If you go to votetravis.com, there still is right up there at the top, it says poll worker sign up form. And you can sign up to work as a poll worker. And like I said, it is a paid gig. And I think you just maybe need to be 18, or it's a good way if you're like really passionate about voting to earn a few extra bucks and also kind of learn more about the experience. I know a lot of people have done it and just say it's cool. I don't know if there's any particular screening process for who gets to be a poll worker. That I don't know about. I think there's some short training that you do, but otherwise, like I said, it tends to just be community members. And as you've probably heard, traditionally it tends to be older folks, which is why there's been a push lately to try and get some younger people to be poll workers, because less likely to be immunocompromised. And
yeah, absolutely. I signed up and I'm just waiting to hear back. So
oh,
that's kind of
really?
what I was wondering, is how the
Yeah.
process like maybe took. But I know with early voting, there's obviously a focus on getting that situated first. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
I would say that the county office is just completely underwater right now with craziness.
Yeah, and I specifically signed up to do it on election day so that we
Okay.
have plenty of time.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too worried yet, but if you still don't hear anything in another week or so, maybe give them a call. But yeah, I wouldn't be too alarmed. I know they've been having to send out tens of thousands of mail-in ballots, prepare, and then
Yeah.
obviously prepare all of our election sites in a way that they've never had to prepare them before. So it's a lot of extra work. But
For
we do
sure.
have our county, I think, does do a good job of trying to do the best they can given the circumstances and limited budgets. Our local officials are passionate about voting, so we're
Awesome.
lucky in that regard.
Yeah, I'm excited to help out. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, maybe Nina, do you want to go ahead and talk about Prop B?
Yeah. And before I do that, I'll just do a quick introduction to Shoal Creek Conservancy. We are a nonprofit organization that makes improvements to the Shoal Creek and the Shoal Creek Trail, which the Shoal Creek runs for 11 miles through Austin, from north of Highway 183 all the way to Lady Bird Lake. And so we are working to build out a connected, seamless pathway of hike and bike trails all throughout the Shoal Creek corridor. We're working to restore fishable, swimmable water to Shoal Creek. And we also have lots of opportunities for folks to get involved in helping make these things happen and helping to steward the creek through cleanup events and other ways, which is what Maria does. So if you sign up to volunteer with us, Maria will be the one working with you. And my name is Nina, and I am the projects and policy manager at Shoal Creek, which means that I work on implementing a lot of the projects that we're planning with the city. And today I am going to talk about Prop B. Let me share my screen here. All right, so Amy gave a terrific overview of Prop A, the transit bond, and we also have a chance on this ballot to vote for major improvements to our bikeways, trails, sidewalks, all kinds of the kinds of infrastructure that help you walk and bike and use mobility devices safely on our city streets. So I'm going to talk first a little bit about what a bond is and why we use them. So a bond is essentially a loan that a city takes out with the permission of voters, and the city pays that loan back over time with taxes. So when voters vote to approve a bond, their tax rate goes up slightly, and then that money is taken over time to pay back that loan. So we use bonds frequently to make capital improvements, which is the term for anything that we build for people to use in a real life kind of concrete way. So roads, bridges, new buildings, trails, all that kind of stuff is what we call capital improvements. And bonds are really the major source of funding for how we're able to build these things that our community uses. So many of the you know, our most loved places in Austin were built thanks to voters approving bonds. So the Austin Central Library is an example. Voters approved a bond to pay for this library in 2006. The boardwalk on the Butler Trail at Lady Bird Lake was also funded thanks to a bond in part that was part of a $90 million mobility bond that voters approved in 2010. And more recently, in 2016, voters approved another big mobility bond. And one of the exciting projects that came out of that was a new 5.5-mile protected bikeway along Shoal Creek Boulevard, and safer intersections to protect people on foot and on bike to go along with that. So bonds do have the ability to do a lot of great things for our community and really build things that, you know, we all need and all benefit from. So Proposition B, there's a lot of things that it's proposing to fund. The total amount of this bond is $460 million, but I'm just gonna pull out a couple of highlights here. It includes $80 million for sidewalks, which are a huge need in Austin, as you've probably noticed if you've ever tried to walk anywhere ever. So there is an example to just illustrate the magnitude of our need for better and more sidewalks is that there are over 3,000 Cat Metro bus stops in Austin. And of these, only 6 have a complete sidewalk network that's ADA accessible within a quarter mile in all directions. So that just gives you a sense of, you know, the scale of the problem at hand, and how many sidewalks we need to build to address it. There is also $120 million for urban trails and bikeways, and $102 million for large capital projects, such as a new bike ped bridge crossing Lady Bird Lake at Longhorn Dam that would also be part of the Butler Trail. So this is, you know, Prop A and Prop B are going to be voted on separately as different propositions, but they really are complementary to one another, because through, you know, transit has the ability to move many people safely all at one time, and increase the capacity of our roadways so that, you know, our existing roadways can move more people and we don't need to keep building more and more roads. And through building out these safe and comfortable sidewalks, bikeways, trails, we can double or even triple the number of people who are within a half-mile walk or a mile bike ride from a high-capacity transit stop. So they're all part of the same network that will help people get around Austin in a more sustainable way. So they, so, you know, they're very much complementary and related to one another. Let's see. On the note about the $120 million for urban trails and bikeways, one particularly exciting project in this area is that Prop B would fund what we are calling this 30-mile big loop of urban trails and bikeways that traverse the city. So Shoal Creek here is depicted on this map in orange. And these trails in green over here are other trails in the city's urban trail, the planned urban trail network. So this needs to be updated now that we have built out the Shoal Creek Boulevard Bikeway. But basically the solid line is, those are trails that exist, and the dotted lines are trails that are planned but have not been funded, so they haven't been built yet. So Prop B would provide funding to build out a whole actually citywide network of urban trails and bikeways that goes beyond just this loop, but a part of it, it would also fund the big loop. So this is a really cool piece of the urban trails plan that would, it shows you how Shoal Creek can be, connected to all these other parts of the city, that it's through trails and bikeways. So this is a very exciting possibility, and it's a big part of the reason why we at Shoal Creek Conservancy are so excited about supporting Prop B. Is it really increases our ability to connect Shoal Creek to other trails, and really give even more people the opportunity to experience all the great things that Shoal Creek has to offer. And the same could be said for every other urban trail in Austin as well. Once you start building out a network instead of just building pieces of trails here and there, it really makes every trail better, because you can use it to get from place to place. Then here's an image of this, the preferred alternative that was voted on by community members for the Longhorn Dam Bridge to connect over Lady Bird Lake here. I don't know if this is the final one that they're going to use, but this is an image from one of their community outreach events. So this is currently this is currently what you do when you walk across the Longhorn Dam Bridge. You're between this chain link fence and this railing. So having a new nice bridge would make that experience a lot better. In terms of the financial impact of this bond to taxpayers, the owner of a median value home, so again, Amy was saying that that's about $325,000, would pay at most $6 to $7 a month, or $76 a year, when spending of these funds is at its peak. So the cost increase would last until those bonds are paid off, typically in around 20 years. So that is, that's the price tag that we're looking at for this bond. And the Austin Common has a really great explainer on the details of this bond. If you'd like to learn more, I thought they did a really fantastic job of breaking down the different things that it funds. You can also go to safemobilityforall.org, and that the bond campaign has more information about and more specifics on each bucket of funding and what it goes to. So that's a big, I would say, out of all the ways to get involved in local civic issues right now, supporting Prop B is a really big, important part of what you can do to shape the future of the city. And then I have one more quick note here about some just upcoming opportunities to keep your eye on. The city will actually be revising the urban trails plan along with the sidewalk, the city's citywide sidewalk plan in the coming year. And so they will be doing a pretty intensive community engagement process to get thoughts from the public on where we would like to see new trails planned in the network, and how, where we could build new trails and enhance existing trails to help folks get around. That will be, we'll be promoting that out when those opportunities come up, but it will likely be in early 2021 is looking like when that will start to happen. So follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we'll let folks know when that's happening. You can also follow the City of Austin Public Works Department on Facebook. So that is, that's what I've got for, supporting Shoal Creek and getting involved in the environment in the near future. And I think Maria is going to talk a little more about just ongoing programs that we have to help you do that as well.
Yes. Thank you, Nina. As Nina mentioned, my name is Maria Dar, and I am the programs manager at Shoal Creek Conservancy. So what I do on a regular basis is really heavily involved with all of the outward facing education and outreach and volunteer component of our organization. So I am really passionate about inspiring people to feel like they can be stewards of, you know, their community, the environment they live in, and the places that they love to visit. So I will kind of shift gears here a little bit and talk less about things that are specific to voting and more focused on generally ways that you can advocate for parks and trails, specifically in Austin, and also, you know, stewardship. So let's talk about some healthy streets. So one way that you can start to advocate for parks and trails and green spaces is familiarizing yourself with the Healthy Streets Initiative. This basically ensures that people in all parts of the city have access to spaces where they can safely exercise and receive the mental and health benefits that come with spending time outside. So Healthy Streets in Austin, they were developed in response to COVID-19, and they allow people to exercise close to their home, provide alternatives to crowded parks and trails, and they offer space where people can easily maintain 6 feet of distance from one another. And they also just keep people healthy in mind, body, and spirit. So I hope that if you haven't already perused a Healthy Street, that you will be encouraged to think about looking up where they are and participating. So they're achieved by limiting access to only residents, deliveries, and emergency vehicles. So they're soft closures, and they only limit through traffic to these areas. And you can look up exactly where they are on the website that we have listed here. And you can also support the Healthy Street Initiative by becoming a block captain. The duties of this position include helping set up barricades or signs and provide feedback and suggestions based on the experience that you would have being on the ground. Also, I'd like to add that it's a great way to get to know your neighbors and build some community in your neighborhood. So I hope you'll check it out. And other ways that you can support the Healthy Streets Initiative is by providing feedback to the city and voicing your comments, concerns, or suggestions for, you know, new streets as well. Like I said, the website that's listed here, you can find all the currently designated healthy streets, and you can find the areas where you can list specifically your feedback for the city in the comments section. But as it's been said before, really feel empowered to email council members directly. They can advocate for the things that are important to you, which I hope would be things like healthy streets and parks and trails. So Nina, if you would head over to the next slide. Okay, cool. So another way that you can support parks and trails in Austin is by utilizing 311. If you call 311, utilize the mobile app, or visit the city's website, you have the power to communicate directly with the city of Austin to report issues that matter to you. Of course, I would follow up these sorts of things with multiple avenues, because you can call 311 and you can also utilize the mobile app, and you can also submit things by the city's website. So in regards to public lands, roads, sidewalks, and intersections, this is a direct way to provide your feedback to the city. So we commonly encourage people to report things like litter and graffiti that they see on public lands along Shoal Creek. But the power doesn't stop there. Like I mentioned, you can report unsafe conditions at intersections or along roadways, and you can specifically request that the city installs things like pedestrian beacons. You can report if signs are knocked over, or if there's, you know, a need for updating any aging infrastructure that you notice. We have a success story of a local running group, the Shoal Creek Striders. They did this in the past along Shoal Creek. Their efforts of repeatedly reporting things to 311 got the Silverway Bridge fixed. It was a real pain for them because they have weekly runs that they do, and they had to always take detours, and the broken slats on the bridge was specifically what was keeping them from using it, and everyone else who crosses in that area. So it works. And for more info, you can visit the city's website that we've listed here, and you can also check out our YouTube. We have an instructional video that walks you through submitting a report via the mobile phone app. It's very simple, so I encourage you all to check it out. And then our next bit, so we recently launched a program called the Creekside Neighbors Program as part of the implementation of our Watershed Action Plan. And so if you're not familiar with the Watershed Action Plan, it's a holistic, long-term effort that aims to restore Shoal Creek to a swimmable and fishable creek. The Shoal Creek watershed is an urban watershed with many different stakeholders that impact Shoal Creek's water quality. So this includes visitors, businesses, homeowners, renters, just to name a few. And each individual has the ability to positively impact the water quality by adopting small changes. So, the success of the Watershed Action Plan really hinges on the investment of everyone for honestly decades to come. So you might be asking yourself, what exactly is the Creekside Neighbors Program? So it's a program that provides stakeholders within the Shoal Creek watershed, specifically with resources to improve Shoal Creek. So Nina, you can head to the next slide. So one way is by providing supplies to individuals who live along the creek so that they can host their own creek cleanups. And another is by offering a quarterly newsletter and just in general having this whole central location of a bunch of resources that will help individuals change small behavioral things. So, depending upon your needs, we make it easy for stakeholders to find more info so they can conserve water, find out ways to sustainably care for their lawns, via programs like the city's Grow Green program, connect residents to a plethora of rebates, grants, and free items that basically just help individuals implement those small changes that have a large impact on Shoal Creek. Any small change that each individual can make to stop water and try to hold it in their yard or whatever green space they have, slowing the flow, capturing it, and filtering water on their property will make a difference in Shoal Creek's water quality and overall health. And, we all live in a watershed, so this content is broadly applicable for improving the water quality in whatever watershed you live in. So, please feel free to access these resources, regardless of whether or not you live within the Shoal Creek watershed. It's important to be thoughtful stewards. So that is what I have. And does anybody have any questions for myself or Nina? Or Amy, of course. Oh, and I see that Ivy posted the our YouTube channel. So that also is just a good source of content about the Shoal Creek area and fun educational stuff and other things we've done. But okay, no questions? That's fine. Nina or Amy, do you have anything that you would like to add?
One last thing I'll add, maybe just for fun, is the Austin Common. we actually partnered with Hope Outdoor Gallery to do a series of murals this election season. And so if you happen to be around town, we've got a mural on South Lamar across from Uchi, one on the corner of Cesar Chavez and I-35, and one in Springdale General. And we've got some, if you go to our Instagram page, we're doing some like giveaways and stuff for people who take I voted selfies next to the voting murals. Another fun way to get engaged, encourage your friends to vote. You know, kind of the big thing that I like to emphasize on this, or always say, it's like, voting is better with friends, and you should bring your friends along. And you know, I suspect that a lot of us here who are on the call like already are passionate and interested about that. But that's then bring your friend along and get them passionate and interested too. And that's kind of how it works. And I think what makes it fun too, you know, like there's lots of different local businesses too that are doing all kinds of giveaways. I think Home Slice is giving away free pizzas, Juice Land is giving away stuff. There's you know, there's lots of community engagement to try and make this fun. I always like to wear a fun costume when I go vote, like anything to spice it up a bit, bring your friends and make it a bit more interesting. I think it really can have an impact.
Yeah, those are really good suggestions. What I was also going to say is, if anyone who's on the call right now, if you know someone who wanted to attend but couldn't, we are going to post this on our YouTube channel. So please check back and share it with your friends. This is really great content to help everybody make the best decisions they can. So, yeah. Cool. Well,
Thank you guys.
yeah, of course. If y'all don't have any questions, we can wrap this up. But if you do, feel free to just hop in. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Amy, for sharing all of your wisdom with us, and Nina, of course, for explaining Prop B. And thank you all for attending. This was really great.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And if anyone has any other voting questions you think of after the fact, feel free to reach out, send me an email, DM us on Instagram. We're like rapid fire trying to answer voting questions. So definitely ask.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Sure. All right.
Happy voting.